Benny Andersson wrote ABBA's biggest hits, while secretly battling something darker. For 20 years, he kept quiet. Then, in 2011, at age 64, he finally admitted the truth. He couldn't function without alcohol during ABBA's golden years. Every hit song, every world tour, every Grammy, he was drunk through it all. But that wasn't even the hardest confession. He also revealed why songs like "The Winner Takes It All" hurt so much. They weren't just about heartbreak. They were his way of avoiding real conversations. Benny Andersson was born on December 16, 1946, in the Vasastan district of Stockholm. But this wasn't just any birth. He was stepping into a family where music flowed through every room like air. His father, Gösta, may have been a civil engineer by job, but at heart, he was a musician, especially when it came to playing the accordion. Even more important was Benny's grandfather, Ephraim, who filled family events with Swedish folk melodies on his accordion. At home, music wasn't background noise. It was the main event. Benny grew up hearing tunes that had been passed down through generations. That deep connection to Swedish folk music would later find its way into global pop hits, though no one knew it yet. Not even Benny. Everything changed when Benny turned 6. That's when he got his first accordion. For most kids, it might have ended up in a corner after a few days. But not for Benny. He was obsessed. He joined his father and grandfather, playing folk tunes night after night. It wasn't just fun, it was training. He learned how music tells a story, how melodies speak without words. Waltzes, schottisches, polskas, they became part of his musical DNA. Years later, those same rhythms would echo in ABBA songs that filled arenas. But at that point, he was just a boy, learning how to make music with the people he loved. By the time he was 10, Benny was ready to move beyond the accordion. He discovered the piano, and it felt like home. There were no teachers, no lessons, just him, the keys, and hours of trial and error. He played by ear, figuring out notes from the radio, then twisting them into his own versions. He didn't follow rules, he invented his own. Day after day, he sat at the piano for hours. Slowly, he built a style that blended pop with folk, structure with soul. It wasn't long before he could shift between musical worlds like it was nothing. That blend would become one of ABBA's secret weapons. Songs like Dancing Queen owe their signature sound to those lonely hours Benny spent figuring things out by himself. At 15, while most kids were still trying to pass maths tests, Benny walked away from school. It was 1961, and he had made up his mind. Music wasn't just a dream. It was the only path. He started performing at youth clubs around Stockholm, especially in the Vällingby suburb. He wasn't famous yet, but people noticed. The way he played, the way he held a crowd, it was clear he wasn't just another teen with a guitar. He gained a reputation fast, and soon his name was floating around among local bands and producers. It was risky. Sweden back then didn't look kindly on dropouts. But Benny wasn't interested in safety. He was chasing something bigger, and it was working. Around this time, Benny also experienced something that would shape him just as deeply as music: young love and fatherhood. He met Christina Grönvall, a fellow musician. They connected quickly, and by the time Benny was 17, they had a son, Peter. 2 years later, their daughter, Helene, was born. Benny was still just a teenager. Most kids his age were barely figuring out their future, and here he was, trying to balance diapers and rehearsals. It wasn't easy. He had gigs, dreams, and now a family depending on him. But those years taught him something no stage ever could: what it meant to carry real responsibility. And those emotions, the struggle, the love, the guilt, they would one day seep into lyrics that made millions cry. Benny Andersson was just 17 when everything changed. It was October 1964. He wasn't a star yet. He was still working as a bank clerk by day, but at night, he played music. That's when he caught the attention of Svenna Hedlund, the lead singer of the Hep Stars. During a casual jam session, Benny's skill on the organ stunned him. Days later, Benny was officially part of the Hep Stars. The band already had momentum, but Benny added something extra. His classical training, mixed with raw instinct, gave the group a new sound. He brought complexity without losing the beat. Within months, the band took off, And Benny was at the center of it all. Their real breakthrough came in March 1965. That's when they performed Cadillac on national television. The show was called Drop In, and over 1 million Swedes watched it. Huge numbers for a country of just 7.7 million. The energy, the confidence, and especially Benny's electric organ playing left viewers stunned. The band was suddenly everywhere. People called them the Swedish Beatles. Benny, the once quiet teen, was now a teen idol. Girls screamed his name. Photographers chased him. Cadillac sold more than 80,000 copies. A huge number back then, especially in a market ruled by British and American bands. But Benny didn't just want to perform, he wanted to create. Later that same year, he wrote his first original song, No Response. It didn't top the charts, but it was a start. Then, in 1966, he wrote Sunny Girl. That changed everything. It wasn't just a hit, it was a breakthrough. The song had a delicate sadness to it, something uniquely Swedish. It hit #1 and stayed there for weeks. Benny had no formal songwriting education. He did it all by ear. Yet, Sunny Girl sold more than 50,000 copies and got covered across Europe. Swedish pop, long seen as second tier, suddenly had global potential, and Benny was leading the way. Between 1964 and 1969, the Hep Stars dominated Swedish pop, and Benny wrote many of their biggest hits. Songs like Wedding, Consolation, She Will Love You, and It's Nice to Be Back didn't just sell well, they became part of Swedish culture. Wedding, released in 1966, stood out with its rich arrangement and emotion. Consolation and She Will Love You were both top 5 hits. It's Nice to Be Back was a live show favorite. While most Swedish bands copied British or American styles, Benny created something original. By 1967, the Hep Stars had sold over 400,000 records in Sweden. That was almost unheard of, and Benny's songwriting was at the core of it all. On June 5, 1966, Benny Andersson was on tour with his band, the Hep Stars. At the same time, Björn Ulvaeus, also 18, was touring with the Hootenanny Singers. That afternoon, their paths crossed in a park called Slottsparken in Linköping. They sat on a bench, guitars in hand, and began playing Beatles songs together. What started as a simple jam session would end up changing pop music forever. That moment sparked a creative partnership that would lead to ABBA. Over 400 million records sold, and one of the most successful songwriting duos in history. That park bench still exists, and today, it plays ABBA songs when you sit on it. As Björn once said, "My life had become completely different if we had not met here." Soon after that meeting, the two started writing songs together. Their first collaboration was a track called Isn't It Easy to Say. It wasn't a global hit, but it meant everything to them. It was recorded by the Hep Stars and appeared on an album that reached number 12 on the Swedish charts. That song proved they had something special. They didn't stop there. By the end of the 1960s, they were writing for other artists, perfecting their craft and building the sound that would one day take over the world. But they weren't just thinking about music. They were thinking about business too. Together with Stig Andersson, who would later become ABBA's manager, they launched Union Songs, a publishing company that gave them full control of their music rights. That move was rare for musicians at the time. It meant that when the big money started rolling in, they didn't have to share it with outside companies. They owned their songs. That decision would make them millions in the decades that followed and protect their legacy. Then came 1969. Benny had entered the Melodifestivalen contest with a song called Hedge Clown. It came in second place after a tense vote. But something more important happened that night. Backstage, Benny met a young singer named Annie Frid Lyngstad. Within weeks, they were dating. Their romance quickly turned into a musical bond. She wasn't just his girlfriend. She would become one of ABBA's voices. That meeting helped complete the group that would change everything. In 1970, Benny and Björn released an album called Lycka, meaning happiness. On one of the tracks, Hedge Gamleman, they brought in their girlfriends, Annie Frid and Agnetha Fältskog, to sing backup vocals. That track was the first time all 4 future ABBA members appeared on a song together. It became a hit in Sweden, reaching number 5 on the charts, and staying at the top of the radio rankings for 5 straight weeks. It wasn't just a song, it was the birth of something massive. A year later, in 1971, Stig Andersson gave Benny and Björn another opportunity. He hired them as staff producers at Polar Music. That job gave them everything they needed: access to studios, freedom to experiment, and hands-on experience in arranging and recording. They weren't just songwriters now. They were becoming complete producers. They used this time to sharpen their skills and test new sounds. These experiments would later shape ABBA's signature style. Then came the night that changed their lives. April 6, 1974. Eurovision, Brighton, England. They performed Waterloo and lit up the stage with their outrageous costumes and energy. The song won by 6 points, becoming Sweden's first Eurovision victory. Waterloo sold nearly 6 million copies and even broke into the US and Australian markets. But here's the twist. Benny didn't actually see that performance live. He was there, on stage, but said years later that he didn't watch the full footage until decades after. The moment had been such a blur, he hadn't fully taken it in. From that night onward, Benny and Björn were on a roll. Between 1972 and 1982, they wrote and produced every single ABBA song, all of them, from Mamma Mia to Dancing Queen to Fernando. Dancing Queen hit #1 in over a dozen countries and became their only US chart topper. Fernando sold over 6 million copies in 1976 alone. These weren't just pop hits. They were anthems heard across the globe. Benny's perfectionism was legendary. He would spend weeks refining songs until every note felt right. That's why the music still holds up today. What made ABBA's sound so special wasn't just the melodies, it was something deeper. Benny had grown up with Swedish folk music, and he never left that behind. He blended it with British pop, American rock, and even disco. The result was something new, catchy but emotional, joyful but sad. ABBA songs made you dance, but they also made you feel. Benny's talent as a composer and arranger helped craft a sound that was fresh yet timeless. As the band exploded in popularity, they toured the world. But Benny wasn't in it for the fame. He was always more interested in the studio than the stage. He played the keyboards during shows and kept the music tight, but his heart was in writing. Even while traveling, he kept composing. That balance, performing live and creating new music, was rare. Most people pick one. Benny did both. Over time, ABBA sold more than 385 million records. But Benny never chased the spotlight. He chased the sound. He kept pushing, kept creating, even after the band stopped performing. And thanks to those early choices, like starting union songs and learning production inside Polar Studios, he had the freedom to keep going on his own terms. Benny Andersson was already a star in Sweden with his band, the Hep Stars. Anni-Frid Lyngstad, everyone called her Frida, was gaining attention after winning a national singing contest. When their paths crossed, something clicked. It wasn't just romantic, it was creative. That same year, they made their relationship official. Benny started helping with Frida's solo music. What began as collaboration quickly turned into something much bigger. In 1971, they moved in together. They weren't just dating anymore. They were building something, not just a life, but a sound. That sound would soon be known around the world as ABBA. Benny and Frida weren't alone. Björn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog joined them. 2 couples, 1 group. The chemistry was real, on stage and off. Fans loved it. The music was catchy, but the couples gave it heart. Benny and Frida became the emotional engine behind the band. On October 6, 1978, after nearly 9 years of living together, Benny and Frida got married. By then, ABBA had already taken over Europe. Songs like Dancing Queen and Take a Chance on Me were blasting from radios everywhere, even in America. Their wedding wasn't just a personal celebration. It was national news in Sweden. Paparazzi swarmed the ceremony. Fans camped outside for a glimpse. On the surface, it looked like a fairy tale. But behind the scenes, things weren't so simple. Benny had always been more comfortable in the studio than in real life. He later admitted it. He expressed himself better through music. While Frida opened up easily, Benny poured his feelings into chords and melodies. Their love lived in the music, not in the conversations. For a while, that worked. Their duets had a fire that couldn't be faked. But when the recording stopped, the distance started to show. Frida wanted connection. Benny, outside the studio, often shut down. That emotional mismatch grew over time. What once felt intimate started to feel lonely. Frida craved direct love and honesty. Benny offered harmonies instead. Their music kept sounding better, but their personal bond quietly began to fall apart. In late 1980, they separated. The divorce came a year later. In 1981, the timing couldn't have been more telling. ABBA was nearing its end. Their final studio album, The Visitors, came out that same year. It sounded different, darker, sadder. Songs like When All Is Said and Done and One of Us carried real pain. Listeners felt it. They were hearing the collapse of not just a band, but two marriages. That album, some say, is a pop masterpiece because of how real it was. Benny and Frida's breakup gave it its soul. But there was another battle Benny had been fighting, quietly and for years: alcohol. At the height of ABBA's fame, while the world danced to their hits, Benny was drinking more and more. It helped him escape from the pressure, from the emotional weight, from the pain of his marriage falling apart. Nobody knew how bad it was. He kept the show going, hit after hit, but inside, he was falling. He later said it clearly. He couldn't function without alcohol. That's when he knew he was in trouble. It wasn't about partying, it was about survival. He needed it just to feel normal. That scared him. Fame had given him everything, but addiction threatened to take it all away. In 2001, 20 years after ABBA's last major UK hit, The Winner Takes It All, Benny quit drinking. The timing was more than coincidence. It was a full circle moment. The end of one chapter, the start of another. He got help. He made it through, and he stayed sober, year after year. By 2011, he finally opened up publicly about his addiction. For the first time, fans saw not just the artist, but the man. But the story didn't end there. His son, Ludwig, later struggled with addiction too. It was heartbreaking. Benny knew exactly what that fight felt like. They talked about it. They supported each other. Ludwig admitted that addiction can take over fast, especially when it runs in the blood. Their honesty helped break the silence. They showed the world that even the strongest families can face this and still find a way through. They say music can heal, but for Benny Andersson and his bandmates in ABBA, it was often a way to hide. When Björn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog's marriage ended in 1980, the pain didn't come out in arguments. It came out in song. That same year, Björn sat down, poured himself a drink, and wrote The Winner Takes It All in a single night. He said it wasn't about their divorce, but no one believed him. Not when Agnetha had to sing lines like, "Tell me, does she kiss like I used to kiss you?" She delivered it with so much raw emotion, it brought people in the studio to tears. Björn called it a message wrapped in sound. It wasn't a conversation. It was a way to say what couldn't be said out loud. Just as that wound was still open, Benny Andersson was going through his own breakup with Frida. They had been together since 1969, married in 1978, and divorced by 1981. Out of that pain came When All Is Said and Done. Benny captured the numbness and finality of a relationship that had run its course. He wasn't looking for reconciliation. He was just trying to make sense of the silence. Frida sang the song, even as she lived the heartbreak it described. "Here's to us, one more toast, and then we'll pay the bill." It sounded like closure, but in reality, it was avoidance. Benny later admitted the truth. These songs weren't about working through emotions. They were about dodging them. He said he used music to escape, to sidestep the pain, to keep the hard conversations locked away. "I gave my best lines to songs," he confessed, "not to the people who needed to hear them." His piano spoke the words he couldn't say. That silence between the band members slowly widened. The music was beautiful, but the bonds were breaking. ABBA didn't explode. They just faded. No tabloid scandals, no dramatic exits. Just four people slowly growing apart. Björn and Agnetha had ended. Benny and Frida were no more. The studio sessions felt heavier. Benny called it a creative death. The joy was gone. They pushed through until 1982, but by then, the spark had vanished. ABBA, the global sensation, was quietly falling apart. What the world saw was a perfect pop machine. What was really happening was four tired people mourning something they couldn't fix. After ABBA, Benny didn't stop. In 1983, he and Björn teamed up with Tim Rice for the musical Chess. Over 3 years, They poured their energy into a story inspired by Cold War tension and a chess match between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky. It wasn't just theater. It was strategy, politics, and passion set to music. One Night in Bangkok became a global hit, even though it was banned in Thailand for its lyrics. I Know Him So Well, a duet between two women in love with the same man, topped UK charts for 4 straight weeks. When Chess hit London's West End in 1986, it ran for 3 years. ABBA was over, but Benny had found a new stage. But even with international success, something kept pulling Benny home. In the 1990s, he returned to his roots. Over 5 years, he and Björn worked on Kristina från Duvemåla, a musical based on Swedish novels about a family's journey to America in the 1800s. It premiered on October 7, 1995, in Malmö and ran for 671 performances across Sweden. Over 1 million people came to see it. The cast album stayed on the charts for 74 weeks. One song, Guldet blev till sand, became a record breaker on Swedish radio. Critics called Benny a modern-day Schubert. He wasn't chasing hits anymore. He was chasing history, memory, and meaning. Then came the world stage again. In 2009, Kristina reached Carnegie Hall in New York. A year later, it played at the Royal Albert Hall in London. The original star, Helen Sjöholm, sang once more, joined by British tenor Russell Watson. With a 50-piece orchestra behind them, they brought the Swedish story to international ears. The show had been trimmed to just under 4 hours, but every second counted. American producers had doubted it would work. The tone was too serious, too sad, too long, but audiences stood and applauded. The immigrant story hit home everywhere. By 2001, Benny had another idea. He formed BAO, Benny Andersson's Orchestra. It had 16 musicians. Some were classical, some were folk, and all of them were among Sweden's best. Helen Sjöholm and Tommy Körberg joined as singers. Their first album topped the Swedish charts and stayed there for 55 weeks. Summer after summer, BO toured the country. But it wasn't just concerts. It was dancing, community, tradition. It felt like Sweden again. Benny wasn't reinventing music. He was bringing it back home. And over time, Benny's own ears changed too. The man who gave the world pop perfection stopped listening to pop at all. These days, he listens to Bach, just Bach, every night. He said there's something mystical in it, something that goes beyond melody. In 2017, he released a solo piano album on Deutsche Grammophon. Benny Andersson's life after ABBA didn't slow down. In fact, it grew deeper, richer, and more meaningful in ways few expected. In 1995, something extraordinary happened. The Swedish government awarded him a professorship in music. This was no ordinary title. It's one of the highest honors in Swedish culture, usually reserved for people who've changed the way their art is seen. Benny was one of them, but that was only the beginning. 12 years later, in 2007, he was inducted into the Royal Swedish Academy of Music. That group has existed since 1771, and it includes Sweden's greatest musical minds. To be part of it is to be recognized as a national treasure. And in 2008, Stockholm University gave him an honorary doctorate, not just for his pop hits, but for something more. They honored his work in preserving Swedish folk music and for guiding young artists trying to find their voice. That meant a lot coming from a man who started out as a teenage organist in Stockholm, just playing in local churches. He had gone from small gigs to global stardom, and now to the highest circles of musical respect. But Benny didn't keep that wisdom to himself. By the late 1990s, he saw what fame could do to people. He had lived it. The pressure, the expectations, the temptation to drown stress in alcohol. He didn't want young musicians to go through the same thing alone. So he started mentoring new talent. He had already founded Mono Music in 1987. But it wasn't just a label. It became a safe space for upcoming composers and songwriters. Many of them were invited into his own studio on Skeppsholmen Island, right in the heart of Stockholm. There, he taught them more than music. He talked about survival, staying grounded, and making music that comes from the soul, not just for the charts. Some of the region's biggest modern names quietly got their start under his guidance. Still, the most revealing part of Benny's later years might be how he talks about his freedom. In a 2017 interview, he said something few would expect from a man who wrote some of the world's biggest pop songs. "I'm freer now as a musician than I ever was in ABBA," he said. "No more deadlines, no pressure to please anyone, just music, pure and personal." He didn't chase the spotlight. Instead, he followed curiosity. He composed musicals like Kristina från Duvemåla, based on Swedish history. He recorded a solo piano album called Piano in 2017. There were no lyrics, no big productions, just him and a piano. And somehow, that quiet little album topped classical charts in the UK and Germany. It was a reminder that music doesn't need to shout to be heard.